Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight, and later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome to Wednesday's edition of On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be reporting from Yorkshire and discussing the future of the British High Street, hollowed out by COVID restrictions and the rise of online shopping. Across the UK, towns and cities are suffering. What are we going to do about it? As ever here on The Money, we'll have a grown-up discussion with people who really know their stuff. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date at 1 o'clock. Coronavirus testing rules are going to be relaxed in England in an effort to reduce workplace shortages due to people isolating. The UK Health Security Agency says from the 11th of January, asymptomatic people who test positive for coronavirus on a lateral flow test won't now have to wait for confirmation on a PCR test to begin their official self-isolation. The self-isolation time is 10 days, with people able to exit a week if they test negative on 2 separate days taken on day 6 and day 7. Meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is to miss today's Prime Minister's questions after testing positive for coronavirus. The Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, will stand opposite the Prime Minister instead at 3 p.m. today. Sir Keir had previously had to isolate after testing positive on the day of the budget in October. An ambulance service says it's still asking suspected stroke and heart attack patients to try to get lifts into hospital. The North East Ambulance Service brought in the measure as wait times, which are usually around 18 minutes, went up to an average of an hour. And it's due to increased demand in the new year, combined with COVID-related staff shortages. Its medical director says it's still taking too long to get patients to hospital via ambulance, and where safe and possible, it's best for them to try and use other means. Nicola Sturgeon's going to address the Scottish Parliament later today on any possible changes to restrictions. The First Minister will speak in Holyrood at 2 p.m. We'll bring you that statement live here. Opposition parties have called for the 10-day isolation period to be cut to 7 if someone tests negative twice. As we've been hearing this morning, the MP Stephen Timms says he would welcome the chance to meet the woman who stabbed him. The Labour MP for East Ham was attacked in 2010. His attacker is currently serving a life sentence for attempted murder. She's written to him to apologise. Stephen Timms told GB News a face-to-face meet-up before she's released from jail would help with the restorative justice process.
She'd grown up in my constituency and spent her life there. And I would have liked to have met her then. The police at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea, so I didn't pursue it. But now that the opportunity perhaps has arisen again, I'd welcome that.
The US judge in the sexual abuse case against Prince Andrew says he'll have a decision very soon on whether or not he'll dismiss the case. The Duke of York's lawyers argue he's covered by a 2009 deal struck between his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She claims Prince Andrew sexually assaulted her when she was 17. Prince Andrew denies all the allegations. There's been political outrage over the decision to grant the tennis champion Novak Djokovic medical exemption from vaccine rules for the Australian Open. Having a COVID jab is a requirement to play in the tournament in Melbourne this month, unless there is a genuine reason for an exemption. The world number one has refused to reveal his vaccination status, but organisers deny he's been given special treatment. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Djokovic should be treated no different to anyone else.
He's not vaccinated. He must provide acceptable proof that he cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons and to be able to access the same travel arrangements as fully vaccinated travellers. So we await his presentation and what evidence he provides to support that. If that evidence is insufficient, then he won't be treated any different to anyone else and he'll be on the next plane home.
The mother of one of the Manchester Arena bombing victims says her son would love the new Glade of Light memorial that opened to the public today. Martin Hett was one of the 22 people killed at the Ariana Grande concert in May of 2017. The memorial that opened today is a white marble halo with the names of each of the victims. Families like Martin's, who lost loved ones in the attack, have been able to put memory capsules inside the halo. You are right up to date. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 1. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Right now, On the Money with Liam.
And coming up on The Money today, the UK's towns and cities are where the majority of us live, and they're the collective engine room of the British economy. Yet our urban areas, particularly UK high streets, have been declining for years, a trend accelerated during this COVID pandemic. We highlight new research on the state of UK towns and cities and debate the best way forward. Plus, each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a policymaker or business leader. Well, today's guest is Jennifer Rosenberg, who ran one of Britain's largest privately owned ladies' wears manufacturers. She'll be telling us about her remarkable business career and how she persuaded the rather stuffy Marks & Spencer's board of directors to shorten ladies' skirts. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, suggestions on the future of the UK High Street or anything else we discuss on The Money today. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. We'll be reading out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. Whether you're watching on television or listening on the radio, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. Now, our towns and cities are, of course, vital to the social and economic well-being of individuals, communities and the UK as a whole. Over half of us, around 55%, live in urban areas, which are also the beating heart of commercial Britain, where most trade happens and the vast bulk of our national wealth is created. Our towns and city centres, though, are being hollowed out. 5 years ago, just 10% of retail sales were online. That grew to 20% at the start of 2020, surging to around 30% during this COVID pandemic. Almost 2/3 of Brits worry the high street is at risk of disappearing, not least in the UK's smaller towns and cities. This is one of the major commercial and cultural trends of our time. Well, today, a new report from the Institute of Economic Development and the Lichfield's Planning and Development Consultancy examines how anti-COVID restrictions over almost 2 years now have accelerated the decline of the UK's high streets. Increasing empty retail units and decreasing footfall, as well as increasing online sales and more working from home. This new report sets out proposals for the urgent action required to regenerate, renew and revive our towns and cities. For too long, it argues, local authorities have lacked the resources, finances and ultimately the powers and freedom from central government to take the lead in regenerating their urban areas. The government says it will soon be publishing a Levelling Up white paper. That's a policy document which proposes upcoming legislation. That white paper should include significant devolution away from Westminster and towards local government, the Institute for Economic Development argues. A strong independent retail offer, we're told, plus year-round programmes of cultural events and family-friendly activities are the key strategies for underpinning successful town centres of the future. More needs to be done, the report says, to ensure towns and cities have a strong blend of housing, retail, workplaces and leisure opportunities. The vast majority, 92%, of economic development and regeneration professionals surveyed confirm that town centre vacancy rates have indeed increased sharply over the past 5 years. Yet a higher than expected 49% say they are positive or very positive about the prospects of town centres becoming stronger in the years ahead. Now, is such optimism warranted and justified, or is it naive and misplaced? And that's your On the Money question today. Can the UK high street be saved? Well, here on The Money, as regular viewers know, we have grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff, talking of which I'm joined by Nigel Wilcox. He's the Executive Director of the Institute of Economic Development, which co-authored today's report into UK towns and cities. Very nice to see you, Nigel. And, of course, in the studio, he's back. It's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of Regionally and a friend of the show and On the Money regular. Nigel, let's start with you. I was taken by the survey conducted under the auspices of your report that said, while 92% of economic development and planning professionals agree that vacancy rates across UK high streets are much higher, pretty much half of those professionals still think the outlook for UK high streets is relatively rosy.
Yeah, I think that's right, Liam. It is, of course, disappointing that so many of us are finding that our local towns have got less to offer, less retail, less leisure space. And of course, they've all had a very, very bad crisis. But, you know, towns have come through this before. I think we're just in a period of reinvention now. And actually, we just need some planning to get these towns back into rude health.
Justin, what's your view on this? You know, you're a denizen of the City of London, known for that, but also you run this company regionally. You're all about investing in regional Britain, developing or redeveloping regional stock exchanges, regional financial centres. Are you relatively rosy in your outlook for the UK high street?
Well, it's an opportunity. Now, we can waste it, but I think it's a great opportunity. People sit there and say, well, the internet's wrecked it all, it's gone elsewhere.
No. Online shopping.
Absolutely, but no, those things, you've got the essentials. A lot of that does go on online. But good retailing is entertainment. People like shopping, not just the buying of stuff, but everything that goes with it as well.
Interaction, the experience.
All of that. And so where you get that right in towns and cities, it's very effective. There's a good example, actually, in central London. You've got Marylebone High Street, where they quite deliberately say, we're not letting all the banks in and all the usual ones, because most high streets in Britain, you can recite probably 70% of the names because they're identical. Our high streets became really, really dull. only reason you knew where you were was you actually looked at the sort of signpost and know which town you were in.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity for smaller business, and as you were saying just now, localised business. Make it local. Better for businesses because they're shorter supply chains, and you're really focusing on local demand quickly.
Nigel, your Institute for Economic Development has published a major report today, which we've highlighted, along with Lichfield, the planning consultancy, of course. What's your quick fix solution, or is there one, to revamp the British High Street? It's all very well the centre of London, and Justin talks about Marylebone, which, with respect, is a relatively prosperous part of the capital. But how about smaller cities and towns across the UK? What can they do?
So I think there's two stages to this, and the work we did with Lichfields has pointed this out. I mean, I think immediately we've got this issue around how we repurpose some of the vacant space. So what can we do around that? And the survey certainly was showing that leisure and cultural activities, food and beverage, independent retail was super crucial. And as we've just heard, just making sure that we just don't end up with these towns that are clones of one another is essential, because these need to be places where we want to spend time, we want to dwell, we want to have a good experience. But we also need to make sure that people are coming into towns and cities for all sorts of reasons. So all the services, the doctors, the dentists, the solicitors, the general work that you might do, more offices, therefore more lunchtime footfall, more retail, that means more people are there. Now, so if we can repurpose the space in the short term, then great. But in the longer term, we really need to think about a position where actually the first choice is that we put development in a town centre. We've made many planning decisions over far too long that have meant that all sorts of services are really been put in place to suit the convenience of the car user, haven't brought people into a town centre. We've lost that critical mass and that ability to find a way of bringing people in and enjoying themselves. And I think in terms of those longer term decisions, then it is about some of these planning decisions that make places nice places to want to live, work and indeed shop.
Justin, increasingly, high street space is being turned over to retail, whether above shops or shops themselves. Into residential, whether above shops or shops themselves.
Yep.
Office blocks being turned into residential properties. What do you think of that trend?
Well, actually, it's very positive. Again, look at some of the examples you've had. Admittedly, most of my examples tend to be in the southeast.
Yeah.
But you can see the investment money's gone in, and also planning. Actually, you were just highlighting the need for planning, getting more people living in the centre. Why? Because it's a nice place to be. Well, you can look at a lot of town centres, city centres. Actually, they're not a nice place to be. Friday evening in some of them is pretty dreadful. You don't want it. So you have to have that blend, get more people living in those areas. We've seen some big mistakes. Certainly, I've seen one or two places where overseas investment money's gone in just to buy the property. They're not going to live there.
Yeah, just to park their capital, knowing that it will appreciate. It's in a safe jurisdiction like the UK. Nigel, let me put this to you. A lot of residential properties now, conversions are now happening on UK high streets, particularly under this jurisdiction called permitted development rights. It's a rather lax form of planning permission. And you'll know, and I know well, because I've written a book about it, that these permitted development rights flats, often they don't have to comply with regular requirements that affect other residential properties and new builds when it comes to living space and so on. Wouldn't you acknowledge that a lot of the residential property developed from existing retail and office buildings under permitted development rights has been pretty substandard and in many cases is quite severely undersized?
There's certainly been some examples of some of this stuff being undertaken in the wrong place, to the wrong quality, and simply not providing the type of living accommodation that people would expect. I think we've got to find a balance between that flexibility and moving quickly to bring forward property that isn't going to be used by offices and retail ever again, but we do need to make sure that the quality is there. And I think we've got to think about some of the equality in taxation between different users in the town centre and their out-of-town alternatives, and take some of that funding that's generated to ensure that there is money put aside to improve the quality of development and the quality of some of the other aspects of the town centre, such as public realm and higher quality buildings and public space.
Nigel's put his finger on something there, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Just in taxation. You've got physical retail units, they're being hit by business rates, which is a very high tax. Even if they haven't made any money or even got any revenue, they still have to pay that tax on the value of the business. Meanwhile, you've got your online retailers. They're often, in different jurisdictions. They're not paying that much tax in the UK. Don't we need an online retail tax of some kind?
Well, you need to replace an analogue tax with a digital tax now.
Yeah.
So quite rightly, it doesn't mean you actually have to punish up everything being online, but you actually create the incentive for investment in locally there, actually in those high streets, shopping squares and all those sort of things. So be able to be more imaginative. Now, when you currently look at the local taxation structures, it's a real disincentive. Why would you take that risk? No, change the structure so the income, the tax can be according to the success of the businesses, not just the fact they've got a property there. Related to success, encourage success.
Let's now broaden out the discussion, because one local authority that has taken redevelopment plans for their city centre into their own hands is Wakefield Council in West Yorkshire. These multi-million-pound changes have started today, with areas being prepared for demolition. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin is in Wakefield to tell us more. Kevin, good to have you on the money as ever. Tell us about these plans that Wakefield Council has to revamp their own high street.
Yes, good afternoon, Liam, and welcome to Wakefield. So just up the road from here, there's the old ABC cinema. It's in its heyday in the 1930s. I'm sure it was a stunning building, but now in 2022, it's a building in decay. It's been not very well looked after for the past 20 years. And just yesterday, Wakefield Council began the work to demolish this building. Now, what they're going to do is knock it down and temporarily create a new open space for people living here with a bit of greenery and some benches, which should look a lot nicer. Wakefield Council actually bought the cinema last year. As I say, it had been in a state of disrepair for 20 years. They did originally hope they could save the building, but after they did all the building works and studies, it just became clear it couldn't carry on, so they're going to knock it down. That demolition work should be completed in May, and they're hoping this new open space should be ready by the summer. But eventually, Liam, what they're going to do is create a new building, and that building will have an Art Deco frontage in honour of that old ABC cinema.
Very interesting, Kevin. And how are the plans for Wakefield City Centre? Plans the local authorities really pushing ahead with, whatever Westminster and Whitehall say. How do the plans for the city centre fit into the sort of broader plans for Wakefield as a whole and the wider area?
Absolutely. So this isn't just about one cinema, although that was the latest step forward. There's a whole row of shops behind me. You can see the land behind me that Wakefield Council's bought, and it's going to build houses on there. So there will be overall 150 homes brought into Wakefield City Centre as part of this. Some other units and shops will be demolished, but they are keeping the historic Harewood Arms pub as well. There's also a new venue opening up in Wakefield soon called Tile Yard North. That's a new music and creative centre, and that's going to open next summer. And we're also going to see the former market hall turned into a performance area as well. And many towns and cities like Wakefield are seeing a lot of their future in the creative sector and showing that it's not just the big cities like Leeds and Sheffield that can have a thriving creative scene. Many of the smaller locations can as well.
Kevin Larkin in Wakefield with some very interesting plans. Keep your eye on those plans, Kevin, as they develop, and we'll keep reporting on them here on The Money. Thank you to Kevin Larkin. To Nigel Wilcox, the Executive Director of the Institute of Economic Development. Justin, you're staying with us. You're watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. I'll be joined after the break by the Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois, to discuss the UK's chronic housing shortage. Debated today in Westminster. Stay with us. You're On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A bright and breezy winter's day out there. Many places seeing blue sky and plenty of sunshine. It is cold. It's going to get frosty tonight. And so although the winds are easing, it is still pretty blustery across the east. The isobars close together there through the North Sea. So a cold wind blowing on those North Sea coasts. But elsewhere, the winds certainly easing off through the day, lighter than yesterday, and many places fine and sunny. Now, there are some showers across Wales and Northern Ireland. We'll keep one or two scattered showers here today and across the far northeast of Scotland as well. Maybe the odd one grazing the east coast of England later into parts of Norfolk. And it does feel cold across eastern England. Temperature only 4 or 5 degrees. Add on that wind, it feels colder than that. But elsewhere, temperatures 5, 6 Celsius in the sunshine. As I say, the winds for most are quite a bit lighter than yesterday. Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight. And later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, On the Money often focuses on the UK housing market and the fact that lots of young families are unable to find decent, affordable accommodation to either buy or rent. Subsidised social housing built and maintained by local authorities and charitable housing associations is also in desperately short supply. Now, since early 2020, of course, government policy making and broader attention across Westminster and Whitehall has been relentlessly focused on COVID-related issues. But as that hopefully changes and the pandemic ease, the UK's chronic housing shortage, which features highly on surveys of what voters really care about, will increasingly come to the fore. And earlier today, MPs held a debate on precisely that issue. And to discuss that debate, we're joined now by a Conservative backbencher, the Tory MP for Rayleigh and Wakefield, Mark Francois, and of course, economist Justin Urquhart-Stewart is still with us on the Money's very own answer to Gordon Gekko. There he is. Mark Francois, great to see you. Happy New Year to you.
And to you too.
Welcome to the On the Money studio. Now, you and I have talked about housing a little bit over the years. It is, in my view, a bit of a Cinderella subject at Westminster. You know, ministers You know, they don't see sort of communities and housing secretary as a great office of state. Yet so many voters care so deeply about this, and increasingly so. The question I'm so often asked in the street, Liam, I see you talking about economics and business on the telly. How can my kid afford a house?
Well, look, there was a debate in Westminster this morning, which I took part in. It was the first debate of 2022, and it was about the UK house building industry. So I think that is politicians taking it seriously. And what was really interesting about this debate was, you had 10 backbench MPs contributed. Not one of them, and they were from across all parties, had anything really any good to say about the UK house building industry. It was one stream of criticism after another. And in a nutshell, the industry is virtually broken. Why? Because it's massively dominated by 5 or 6 of the major house builders in the United Kingdom who kind of do everything for their own convenience and really who restrict the supply of housing in order to keep the prices up. And one MP after another, myself included, was pointing this out in Westminster this morning.
I've dubbed that in the past contrived scarcity, where the big house builders, which, as you rightly say, dominate the industry, deliberately build out slowly, drip feeding the market to keep prices artificially high. Justin, you follow these issues closely. I'm sure you follow the stocks of the house building industry, which have done very nicely, thank you, in recent years, partly reflecting what Marc Francois has said. Back in 2016, the House of Lords did a really interesting, in-depth examination of the UK house building industry, their Economic Affairs Select Committee, and they said the UK house building industry now has, quotes, all the characteristics of an oligopoly. What does that mean for capitalism?
What it means is that concentration, just so few hands, when you've actually effectively creating a cartel. Now, if this is in America...
They deny that, though, because the cartel's illegal.
But what you'd actually have to see in America, if you saw those sort of groupings getting together, and they've got a good history of doing so, with telecom, steel, any one of the major areas, they would break it up. And now how do you do that? Actually quite easy in this country. You increase local focus. There is no national plan to reorganise housing. It won't be done. Locally, in the regions, they know what they need in each area, give them the ability to do so. And also, there's no shortage of funding, because we know new money's coming in. A lot of the banks are realising this, not making money out of banking anymore. They can make money out of being landlords.
That's right.
And so the money's there, now redirect it and plan it locally according to local needs.
Mark, back in the 80s, the UK house building industry was dominated by small and medium-sized enterprises. They built 2/3 of the houses. 2008 financial crisis came along, wiped out a lot of those small firms. The big guys literally, took the land from them, consolidated, became a lot more powerful. The top 10 house builders in the UK now build around 60 to 70% of the homes. I like capitalism, Justin likes capitalism, you like capitalism.
Yeah.
We all want competition, but how can we make that competition really happen when the big house builders are so dominant?
Well, your colleague mentioned an oligopoly. My A-level economics are a bit rusty, but that's basically a market that is dominated by a few very large and powerful suppliers.
That's right.
So how do you break that up? Well, we have a thing called the Competition and Markets Authority.
That's the new Office of Fair, what used to be the OFT.
Correct. Now, the Office of Fair Trading looked into this back in 2008.
So before the crisis.
Right, and said there shouldn't be any greater concentration in the industry. Since then, it's almost doubled.
Yeah.
So I was arguing very strongly in Parliament today for the Competition and Markets Authority, the antitrust regulator, as they would call them in the States, to now launch a full-blown inquiry into the UK house building industry to look in detail at just how concentrated it's become, and if they conclude it's too concentrated, they have the power to make recommendations for it to be broken up. And I think that's now where we're going to have to go.
So small firms can get more of a look in.
Yes.
But small firms build quickly, don't they? Small firms get planning permission, they build instantly because they need the cash flow. The big builders often sit on the planning permissions they get for years at a time, or don't build them out at all.
Well, or classically, they'll get a big site, and there are some like this in my own constituency, where they'll get a big site, but they'll only build 50 houses a year.
That's right.
So they build it out in a very deliberate manner. They could build quicker, but they don't, because by building them slower, they basically restrict supply, as you were saying, and they help keep prices up. So that's good for them and their shareholders, but it's not good for people trying to get on the house house building ladder. That's why we need a CMA inquiry.
Now, I mean, you see a lot of these large companies, building companies, they're land bankers.
Yeah.
They've controlled the land, and you only have to see this. There's been some examples which did not get enough coverage of companies using shadow companies in front of them to actually make sure competition come in, they can control that site. Come off it.
It's really opaque, isn't it? Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, the UK Land Registry, I've written a book in this area.
Yeah.
Looking at the UK Land Registry, it's impossible, even if you are very, very determined and use forensic lawyer mates pro bono, to determine who actually controls a lot of the land in the UK.
Yep.
And that determines how many houses get built, when and by whom, right?
Absolutely. And so whilst you're going to have that, you're leaving the control in that smaller group, and again, it's done on a national basis, make it down to the regional basis, give them the power and control to do so, and now you can then start encouraging and giving more incentives for smaller companies to move into this area. There's no shortage of money, it just needs that proper creation.
You know, this really is one of the most important economic issues the UK faces, in my humble opinion. Buying a house or trying to get hold of a house to rent, this often the most important economic aspect of people's lives. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We're going to carry on this discussion with Justin Urquhart-Stewart, with Mark Francois MP, who's just hot-footed from a Westminster debate on precisely this issue. Plus, Money Talks interview today is with the manufacturing legend Jennifer Rosenberg. That's up soon. She'll be talking about Britain's largest being Britain's largest supplier for ladies' wear and revealing her personal reasons for raising money in stem cell research. It's going to be very interesting. Before that, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. Let's get you up to date. Coronavirus testing rules are set to be relaxed in England in an effort to reduce workplace shortages because of people isolating. Asymptomatic people who test positive for coronavirus on a lateral flow test will no longer have to wait for confirmation on a PCR to begin their official self-isolation. The Care and Mental Health Minister, Gillian Keegan, says that around 1 million people are currently isolating. Well, meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is one of them. He'll miss today's Prime Minister's questions after testing positive for coronavirus. The Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, will stand opposite the Prime Minister at 3 p.m. today instead. Sir Keir previously had to isolate after testing positive on the day of the budget in October. Hospitals in Greater Manchester have postponed some non-urgent surgeries amid staff shortages due to COVID. At least 6 hospital trusts have declared critical incidents, meaning priority services may be under threat. The Prime Minister acknowledged parts of the NHS may feel overwhelmed in the coming days. Airline bosses are calling for testing requirements for international travellers to be scrapped. Research commissioned by Airlines UK and Manchester Airports Group suggests the tests make little difference in reducing the spread of Omicron. Now it's the dominant variant in the UK. Industry leaders report that the pre-departure testing requirements caused passenger numbers to plummet by 30%. In other news now, the mother of one of the Manchester Arena bombing victims says her son would love the new Glade of Light memorial that opened in their memory today. Martin Hett was one of the 22 people killed in the Ariana Grande concert in 2017. The memorial is a white marble halo and it has the names of each of the victims on it. Families like Martin's, who lost loved ones in the attack, have been able to put memory capsules inside the halo. Well, it's 1:35. You are currently up to date. I'll have more for you at 2 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Today we're focusing on the UK housing market, as many of our young families are often unable to buy or rent decent accommodation. Earlier today, MPs held a debate on the chronic shortage of homes in the UK. And the Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois, joins us now to tell us more. Mark, we were discussing before the break this debate that happened in Westminster Hall. You had many backbenchers lining up to say they don't like the state of the UK house building industry. It's too concentrated, too many dominant players, not giving house buyers of new build homes a fair deal a lot of the time. You asked the Minister why there shouldn't be a full CMA inquiry, a Competition and Markets Authority inquiry, looking at the concentration of the house building industry. What did the Minister say?
Well, he didn't exactly say yes, but he didn't say no. I mean, having been an MP for 20 years, he left the door open.
Yeah, interesting.
And look, we now have in Michael Gove, a pretty characterful Secretary of State. And, if there's anyone who's going to take this on and who's going to kind of, bust this trust issue open, Michael has the kind of cojones to do that, bluntly. So I hope very much that he will look at what happened in Parliament today, not least because the Local Government Association said a couple of years ago there's over 1 million planning permissions for properties, 1 million's worth of properties already granted, but they're not being built out.
Yeah, that's right.
The campaign...
So-called phantom home shelter calls them.
The Campaign for the Protection of Rural England have pointed out that over 500,000 of those are on brownfield sites, which tend to be less controversial. It's the building in the greenbelt that really drives people nuts. So there are it's not, as the house builders would have you believe, these are all NIMBY little local councils who refuse to put one brick on top of another. The councils aren't the problem. It's the
because they're granting the permissions,
yes,
and then the permissions aren't being built out.
Because the house builders build them out at a very deliberate pace to keep the price up. That's the fundamental problem in the UK house building industry, and we're not going to get the homes that we need for the people of this country until we take that head on.
Justin, what Mark is proposing, a full CMA inquiry for the house building industry. It would be a big move by the government, not least because we know the big property developers, the big house builders, they are major donors, not just to the Conservative Party, to the Labour Party too. They are a formidable lobby.
I must say, I find it very funny going to some of the different political groupings. You see the same people there. Hang on a second, you're donating to this party and that party, just covering themselves, just in case. And I find that really upsetting because they're bending the system.
This isn't how capitalism is meant to work, is it? There's meant to be competition.
And also, we've got to find mechanisms to create easier access for people. Now, one of the things we used to have in this country is longer-term leases, where it's actually a cheaper way to get in. We did away with all of that. Now you've got short-term leases, which are frankly ridiculous. And so be more imaginative in where you can actually broaden out ownership and give people cheaper access and not have this fixation the entire time. You are obliged to spend a fortune your entire life paying off your mortgage until you retire. Well, hang on, no, there are better things you can be doing, but still making sure you've got good quality housing.
Mark, we've been focusing on new build homes in this discussion, mainly to buy. We know that generation rent is much bigger than it was. 20% of people in the UK now rent compared to just 10% 15 years or so ago. I wouldn't ever want to host a discussion on house building in the UK without talking about social housing, subsidised housing for low-income and otherwise vulnerable households. I'm sure you've got social housing in your constituency.
I do.
Back in the late 70s, around a third of British households were social housing, council housing. It's now about 17%, not least because some of those council houses have been sold off over the years, but then they haven't been replaced. When are we going to start building more social housing in this country?
Well, there are a number of ways of doing it. So the current model tends to be a developer builds 500 houses on a site, and say a third of those will be so-called social housing or affordable housing, and they'll do that in conjunction with a housing association. Some of those will be primarily for rent. Some of those will be for part rent, part buy, shared ownership. I've always been a great fan of shared ownership because it gave people on a limited income a chance to get a foot on the housing ladder, and they also bring something to the party themselves. It isn't given them all subsidised by the state. So what you want is a mixed housing market. You want private properties, you want social housing, some which is shared ownership, some which is purely for rent, and you want a healthy market. But if you want a healthy market, sorry to return to it, but it's fundamental. It can't be dominated by 5 or 6 big companies.
But you'll know from your constituency post bag that so often affordable homes, they're 80% of local market rates to rent or buy, which is impossible for lots of people. And often those obligations that private developers take on to build affordable housing, to build social housing, to provide, local playgrounds, local infrastructure, they wriggle out of those obligations, don't they? Because they bully the councils, because, again, those developers are so powerful.
Well, in some cases I've seen down the years, the big major house builders, when they're negotiating a Section 106 agreement, they send in a team of extremely experienced lawyers who have to negotiate this agreement up against a bunch of council officers who are doing their best, but it's one of about 5 or 6 things they have to deal with. It's like Tranmere Rovers playing Manchester City.
Indeed.
And who
Tranmere with 10 men.
Right, yeah. And who do you think wins that one 9 times out of 10?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's an incredibly important issue. I'm so glad you're a formidable campaigning MP, as any opponents of Brexit know. I'm personally really happy that you are putting your focus now in Parliament on this housing issue, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Mark Francois and, of course, Justin Stewart here in the On The Money studio. It's a really important subject, one we will return to. I give you my word. Lots of emails on housing and indeed on our earlier discussion on saving the UK high street. Alex says, "Hi Liam and the team." Hi Alex. Good to see you back. It's very kind of you. Councils can't escape the blame for the death of town centres. Many of them charge a fortune for parking, which forces people to shop in retail parks, which don't charge. George emailed gbviews@gbnews.uk to say, "I absolutely disagree with the implementation of an online tax." We're talking about an online sales tax, so bricks and mortar retailers can have a chance at a level playing field. Physical retailers too have the ability to trade on the internet, and it's a market they can't afford to ignore. I agree with that. On this housing issue, Anne contacted us at GB News to say one of the biggest causes of this housing shortage is second and sometimes third home ownership. The only way to stop that is putting higher council tax on second homes. And by high, I mean tax equal to 10% of the property's value annually. And Derek says, Thatcher's right to buy policy created a massive local authority housing shortage that is still with us. And many of those who took up the option do not possess the capital to keep their properties in a good state of repair. Eddie said it's all very good building and converting old properties into private dwellings, but with the increase in the number of people, planning officers remember that the local infrastructure has to be modernised too. Where I live in Colchester, the developer's prime concern is increasing numbers and forgetting about road development, and local councils are only interested in making more money. Keep your emails coming on housing, on the future of the high street, and tell me also what you want to be discussed in future episodes of this show. On the Money, it's your programme too. And now it's time for my daily interview series. Here it is. It's Money Talks. Today's guest is somebody I've wanted to meet for a long time. It's Jennifer Rosenberg, whose career began in the post room at Marks and Spencer's in the 1960s. She later moved to the skirt department, where she persuaded, famously, the Marks and Spencer's board to replace the traditional long skirt with mini skirts, which at the time were, as my mum sometimes says, all the rage. Jennifer left M&S in the 70s to start her own fashion company, J&J Fashions, manufacturing trousers in a small factory in Newcastle. It became one of Britain's largest privately owned ladies' wear manufacturers, employing 3,000 people with 12 factories across the UK. Jennifer also received her OBE in 1989 for her services to the fashion industry, but 10 years after selling her business in the early 90s, Jennifer's husband Ian fell ill with heart failure. Despite being given weeks to live, stem cell treatment in Germany allowed him 3 more years. And during this time, Jennifer realised there was little money available for stem cell research in the UK. And so, always the entrepreneur, she founded Heart Cells Foundation. 2 decades later, this amazing charity has raised millions of pounds for research and also funded a stem cell centre in St Bartholomew's Hospital. Here to tell us more about her incredible life in business and in the charity sector is Jennifer Rosenberg, OBE. Jennifer, it really is an honour to meet you. Thank you so much for coming into the...
Thank you very much for inviting me.
On the Money studio. Tell me about this skirt story. It's such a good one. Well, you started in the post room and you worked your way up.
I started in the post room, and it was interesting in those days in the post room that we had to be checked when we went out to push the post trolleys to make sure that when we bent over the post trolley to get the mail, we were respectable. We weren't showing too much. But that was the early 60s. But suddenly everything changed in the 60s. London was the swinging city. We had the Beatles, we had Bieber, we had Mary Quant. Everything was happening. We had Twiggy. Suddenly we'd come from the doldrums of the aftermath of World War II, and London
Suddenly everything was in colour.
Everything was in colour. I like that expression. It's good. Everything was in colour.
So you went from the post room in M&S to the skirt department.
In the skirt department.
Clearly a very capable person.
Well, I was still a junior, but I could see the way trends were moving, and we had lots of traditional classical skirts, pleated skirts, and I knew we had to get into this new look. So I presented the board, because the board were very involved in those days. M&S, the senior board were amazing.
All men?
All men, yes.
Grey suits?
Yes. Grey suits, but very fingers on the pulse. They knew exactly what was going on. So I presented this 16-inch, I presented to a 16 and an 18-inch miniskirt, and I said, it was Teddy Seif at the time, and I said, Mr. Seif, we really have to try this. And I put it up against me. Unfortunately, I'm short, so it didn't look as short as it would have against somebody who was tall.
Tactical.
So anyway, he said, well, and they used to call you, it was very formal, but I quite like formality. You say, now, Miss Levine, well, maybe we'll do
that was your name back then,
That was my maiden name then. Maybe we'll do a 50-dozen trial. And that, you know, we worked in dozens, not singles, and we'll do a 50-dozen trial. And of course, they went out and they just walked off.
Walked off the shelf.
Walked off. We couldn't then make them fast enough.
Yeah.
And of course, from a business point of view, it was great doing short skirts because it was far more profitable because you were selling them at the same price, but taking up less fabric, and it was good.
What motivated a young woman, with all respect, who started out in the post room to then say, you know what, here's the mighty M&S, I've got a good job here. You're clearly having a lot of influence, telling the board what to do and then taking your advice.
I was suggesting to the board.
And they took you up on your advice. Yeah. But then you think, I know, I can do this. I can start my own business. How did you make that leap, Jennifer? Because that's the leap that so many people fail to make.
Well, it wasn't. When this crossroads occurred in my life, and it was to do with a personal scenario, because I was involved with a manufacturer from M&S, and we were going to get married, and he didn't want me working at M&S.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
So he was an MD of a big public company then, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Sellencorp, which was a major fashion company, a major public company in the fashion world. He decided it would be a good idea to start a little business for me in the northeast of England, and that's how it started. So I went from being this high-powered businesswoman at Marks & Spencer, controlling millions of pounds worth of buying power, to running a little factory in the northeast of England. And initially, I found it very difficult. Because when I was at M&S, I'd pick up the phone.
Yeah, things would happen.
Absolutely,
it's a Rolls-Royce machine.
Absolutely. But there, I'm on my own. But I was determined to make it happen. And I am a very determined person.
And did you enjoy living in the northeast?
No, I used to commute.
You used to commute?
I had a base in London, but I used to commute. But they were amazing people.
Yeah.
The Georges were so
fabulous
good.
work ethic,
Fabulous
highly skilled.
Work ethic. You know, it's interesting you bring that up because rolling the clock forward, and we bought a business in Yorkshire. And the company was growing and growing and growing. And it was interesting to see the difference in work ethic between the employees in the northeast, the Geordies, in Yorkshire, it was Arthur Scargill country.
Jennifer Rosenberg, are you saying the Yorkshire people are lazy?
I'm not saying
My
they're
God,
lazy.
the email's going mad. There's a tsunami of complaints.
I'm saying it's a totally different work ethic because they've been indoctrinated by the miners, by Arthur Scargill. Whereas in the northeast, they were very open, very friendly. They wanted to earn a lot of money because they wanted to go out and party. I mean, they partied all the time.
I could talk to you forever about your exploits in business and this incredible role you played in democratising, if you like, British fashion via M&S. But let's talk about your charity work, which, as I said there in the introduction, did begin really after what happened to your husband. You've really poured your heart and soul into your charity work, haven't you?
This is my passion because, I'm very lucky because I've had 3 amazing careers. I was a senior buyer at M&S and I achieved great things. I then became a major supplier to M&S and again was very successful. And now I'm running this charity, which is my passion. It's my lifelong dream. It was my husband's vision to make this treatment that we're conducting at St Bartholomew's Hospital available to everybody across the UK, so that anybody with heart failure has got the possibility of a better quality of life.
And what's your vision for the charity, and how can people who are watching this and inspired by your story help you to achieve that vision?
Well, they can help me, but the first thing I would say is that if you're interested in the charity, and you really, anybody that's watching should go onto our website, which is theheartcellsfoundation.com, and look at the case studies and see what this treatment, which we have established at St Bartholomew's Hospital, is able to do for people. It's able to give patients with damaged hearts their life back.
Incredible.
But not only the patients, families, everybody that has a serious heart condition, it's the families that get involved as well. So we are really changing lives. And we've established with the initial £8 million we raised, we were able to conduct the first 3 gold standard trials.
Incredible.
Now we fund an ongoing compassionate unit at Bart's Hospital where we treat patients throughout the country. So if anybody's watching that has a serious heart condition and it's based on heart failure, then they should go on our website and see if we can...
Just tell us the website name.
The Heart Cells Foundation. www.heartcellsfoundation.com.
Okay.
And again, go on our website, see what. But what we're planning now, we're now into 2022. Our goal now is to raise additional funds. We're now planning a big fundraising campaign. So if anybody's listening and they've got a checkbook and they want to write out a check, no problem.
Where does the UK stand when it comes to this kind of stem cell research? Because we're pretty good, aren't we?
We are the leaders. When my husband originally had this treatment, we went to Germany, and that's where we became aware of it. But subsequently, the young cardiologist that took us to Germany, Professor Anthony Mather, who's heading up this campaign, and I know his mother watches this programme. So, Mrs. Mather, you have an amazing son. You really, really do. He's saving lives. So seriously, she does watch the programme. We are now planning in 2022 a big fundraising campaign to raise about 8 to 10 million to enable us to roll this treatment out across the UK.
In a nutshell, if I may, just last thought, 2 words of advice for anybody who wants to start a business.
Go for it.
That's 3. Brilliantly done. Jennifer Rosenberg, OB, an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your programme.
You've been watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back tomorrow talking about EU roaming charges and the energy crisis. See you then. But for now, thanks for listening to me today. Thanks for joining me here on GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A bright and breezy winter's day out there. Many places seeing blue sky and plenty of sunshine. It is cold. It's going to get frosty tonight And so although the winds are easing, it is still pretty blustery across the east. The isobars close together there through the North Sea, so a cold wind blowing on those North Sea coasts. But elsewhere, the wind's certainly easing off through the day, lighter than yesterday, and many places fine and sunny. Now, there are some showers across Wales and Northern Ireland. We'll keep 1 or 2 scattered showers here today, and across the far northeast of Scotland as well. Maybe the odd one grazing the east coast of England, later into parts of Norfolk. And it does feel cold across eastern England. Temperature only 4 or 5 degrees. Add on that wind, it feels colder than that. But elsewhere, temperatures 5, 6 Celsius in the sunshine. As I say, the winds for most are quite a bit lighter than yesterday. Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight, and later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below, minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch